Dear listeners, Assalamu alaikum, a very good evening and welcome back to Friday Night Fusion, the new sound of Great Britain. Now, the Palestine and Israel conflict has been a point of great contention over the past 60 years plus. We featured a debate a few months ago that you may recall between a senior Israeli Defense Force commander and a pro-Palestinian academic, the first time ever that such a debate had been featured on community radio or indeed Muslim community radio in history. But today, we bring you part two of that particular discussion. Joining me in the studio, I have a number of representatives from the OneVoice movement, an organisation that is committed to promoting positive dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. I would like to welcome the OneVoice movement. Mr. Anthony Silkoff is with us from the organisation. A very good evening, Anthony. Thank you very much for joining us on Friday Night Fusion.
Thanks very much for having me.
I'm also joined by Gabi Avner, who is actually from Israel. He's one of the people teaming up with OneVoice to actually look at a peace solution, look at creating dialogue between Israel's and Palestinians. Gabi, a very good evening. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
And I'm also joined by Ahmad, who's actually from Palestine. In fact, he's coming to the UK for the very first time. So a very warm welcome to you, Ahmad. A very good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on Friday Night Fusion.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
If I could start off with yourself, Anthony. The OneVoice movement, we've interviewed you in the past. You're doing some fantastic work. But what exactly are you focusing on at the moment?
Sure. Well, thanks again for having us. It's wonderful to be here, and some of your listeners might have heard of us before, but OneVoice is a grassroots movement, an international grassroots movement. We have around 650,000 signatories worldwide, including majority of those Israeli and Palestinian, around 300,000 Israelis and 300,000 Palestinians, who have signed up to agree that they support a two-state solution to end this conflict, which seems to have dogged the Middle East for far too long. It's a movement of people that say, as you were saying in your introduction, that yes, the history is very important, and we certainly don't expect people to forget their history, but we need to be far more solutions focused, and I think that's what's been lacking from the political leadership on both sides. So what we're able to do through having a grassroots movement based in Israel and Palestine is we mobilise the grassroots on both sides to give them a bigger voice and a united voice in calling on both sides for a two-state solution, and for their leadership to take the courageous steps needed to end the conflict and end the occupation.
Gabi Avner, a lot of people who regularly read the newspapers, watch the television screen headlines or listen to the radio would argue that Israelis don't like Palestinians and vice versa, so therefore calling for a solution is quite frankly calling for the impossible. How much truth is there to that?
I think it's an interesting question. I think that you have to recognize that there's a lot of bad history, at times a lot of bad blood, and in general, a general sense of victimization on both sides. However, I would make the point that you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with people who you're in conflict with, and I think that we have to recognize that at the base of this whole conflict is a conflict. It's not a cosmic conflict. It's not an issue of religion. It's an issue of two governments, of two peoples having a dispute over territory, and looking for a way out, looking for a way to resolve this issue. I would add on to that I don't think that in order to resolve this conflict we have to become friends and partners in day-to-day lives in order to resolve the conflict. I think that our responsibility is to search out a political solution and end the violence, and then begin the healing process. That's how I would view that.
Ahmad, a lot of people who are familiar with the conflict, that isn't something that's of course taken place recently, it's been going on for many years now, might say that actually one big problem that you have in Palestine and in Israel is that your political leaders have failed to engage in meaningful dialogue that has actually resulted in anything significant. What do you think your responsibility is as a Palestinian, as a community leader?
Well, it's a very important point. I think OneVoice has something different by bridging our works in Palestine and Israel very hard, and we are working good and in a best manner to bridge the gap between the Palestinian majority and the political level, to make sure that the people will engage in the peace process and to raise their voice, and which is important to make sure that those people will participate in changing this tough reality in the both side, since the people in the past were not able to participate in the peace process negotiation, and they were not up to date with those negotiations. So in One Voice Palestine and One Voice Israel, we are working with the majority and with the moderate people to raise their voice and saying we will need a peaceful security state for the both sides.
However, it has been argued on many occasions that actually Israel has committed a huge amount of atrocities against the Palestinians. They have cut off a lot of food supplies, etc. These are some of the things that people argue. If these allegations and accusations are to be believed, then isn't it incredibly difficult to get people like your fellow Palestinians to sit down on the same platform as Israelis when some of them accuse the Israelis of such huge breaches of their human rights?
In One Voice, we are not calling for for the Palestinian majority to sit alongside the majority of Israel. We are calling to propel and to support our leaders from the two sides to sign a concrete peace agreement. This agreement will establish a two-state beside each other. Each state will like to live in peace and security. And our work is not like, as I said, to sit beside each other, the majority. Our work is to delegate and support the leaders from the two sides to concrete peace agreement, which will end the claims and agony from the two sides and will assure our safety and security for the both sides in a peaceful state of Palestine and security state of Israel.
Something I would like to add on, and if I may, is that I think it's important that as activists, as people who are looking to work for a better future, is that we recognize that on both sides there have been tragic events,
Yes.
and there continues to be a very tough situation. But that we as young people, as youth leaders, look to move past that and look more towards for solutions to the conflict, and not dwell on the past. I think to recognize suffering on both sides. But if we get into the cycle of blaming the other for he's done this, he's done that, I've done this, I've done that, you end up back in the same place.
Sure. A question a lot of people would have for you, Gabby, is this. Regularly we hear about the leadership of the Palestinians, the leadership of the Israelis. The Palestinian militants have fired rockets into Israel. The Israeli government have bombed Gaza once again. These are the headlines that our listeners are reading time and time again. You actually live very near Tel Aviv. Ahmad lives in Palestine. So when we want to find out about the ordinary people and what they think, who better to ask than people like yourselves? What are ordinary Israelis thinking right now? What are their attitudes, their feelings towards the Palestinians?
I believe that it's a complicated question. I think that as human beings we're multifaceted. I think that people have different concerns at different times. People, I think, and this is true on both sides, what's the thing that they're most concerned about? It's about being able to make enough money to close the month. It's about being able to live in security. It's about being able to spend time and raise a family. I think, though, what many Israelis are feeling is that they're fed up with the situation. They're fed up with having conflict after conflict and realizing that this conflict is never going to end, not by violence, not by trying to beat the other into submission, but it's only going to end when the two sides are willing to sit down and talk to each other and have the bravery to sign an agreement. And I think that, again, as Ahmad has brought up, our job as activists is to bring the voice of the people to the politicians and to hold the politicians to task, to make them understand that their future, their political future, is dependent on serving our needs as a moderate majority who demands a solution.
If I can just add something to that, I think
Please
one
do.
of the things I'm proudest about in One Voice is that there's a tendency in all societies, and especially in Israel and Palestine, that the ones with the loudest voices and the ones that seem the most passionate are the ones with the most extreme agendas. And what we show in One Voice is that you can be a moderate, passionate person. You can go out on the streets and demand change, but demand change that involves compromise. You can demand change that doesn't necessarily negate the claims of the other side. You can demand change that is realistic, and that is what we're doing in One Voice. We're mobilising passionate, dedicated people like the two people sitting here, Ahmed and Gabi, who are no less dedicated to their cause than the extremists. In fact, I think they're far more dedicated to their cause, and for me that's what I'm proudest about.
But Anthony, you've really got your work cut out, haven't you, for being able to actually go into Palestine and Israel and try to encourage two sides to speak to each other, to communicate with each other. Has it been a challenge for you or a walk in the park?
It's a huge challenge, but I can talk about some of our successes. However, I would just underline that what we do is it's about getting Palestinians actually to speak to Palestinians and getting Israelis to speak to Israelis. That is where the deficit at the moment is. I think in both societies, actually, there's a large democratic deficit. There's a gap between the politicians and the ordinary people. What we try and do in One Voice is make the politicians far more accountable to their own people, because their own people are demanding change. Their own people support a two-state solution, according not only to the polling that we've done, but to the polling that almost every other organisation has ever done. And so, given that that's what the people want, why aren't the politicians sitting down and sorting it out? And I know that Gabi and Ahmed have fantastic examples of successes that we have had in amongst the challenges.
And I think in the Palestinian society, after like about 65 years of suffering, the people realize that the time has come to build their state instead of sacrificing more and more. And they think that the 65 years of suffering, it's like a big and tough period to survive, and to not in order to continue in the same tragedy. They are willing to build their future, to build their state, to build their strong economy, instead of waiting without doing anything for their society, for their people. So I think there is like a mass reality, or like the mass perception in the both side to reach a concrete peace agreement with a two-state solution.
Now, Ahmad, talk to me a bit about the successes that you've managed to achieve through the One Voice movement, through One Voice Palestine and One Voice Israel, because we don't often hear about them in the news or in the UK even.
Yeah, in One Voice Palestine, we made over the like 6 or 7 years about hundreds of activities during the Palestinian cities and village, from the town hall meetings and hundreds of town hall meetings and political discussion, where we as a youth leader bring like a political or public figures to speak with the majority about the challenges and opportunities of the peace process in the West Bank and Palestine. And we made two important campaigns to support the Palestinian leaders in their application to UN Security Council for a full membership in 2011, and another big campaign to support the Palestinian leader in their application to UN General Assembly in November 2012. And we made a big campaign to boycott the products of the Israeli settlement in West Bank.
So you were very successful in many of those operations that you actually undertook, and the pressure that you exerted on your political leaders. Gabi, how important is it for you as an Israeli to put pressure on your political leaders, and do they listen to you if they are so intent on doing something in particular? Many of them on both sides, Palestinian side and the Israeli side, have been criticized for actually acting as the bricks, as the barriers, if you like, towards a peace solution. Are they really speaking to you?
Well, I think it's a wonderful question. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. I'd like to actually point to an activity that One Voice Israel organized back in January 2011, where we actually, for the first time in history, in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, organized the first ever two-state lobby, wherein we had major politicians from a variety of parties, including, at the time, head of the opposition, Tzipi Livni, come in and declare for the first time in the Knesset that a two-state solution is the only way to end the conflict, and that is something that is most valuable. It has to be highly valued, and we must work, tirelessly for it. I believe it's the second largest lobby in the Knesset, which I think shows the serious attitude which the politicians have taken to it. It was actually organized by a former OneVoice Israel youth activist,
Wow.
who was later elected to the Knesset.
Sure.
But I think that, again, it falls upon us to bring constant pressure on the political level, to bring the voices of the moderate majority, to express to them that, yes, this is what the people want, this is what you need to do. This is the only way to work towards a better future, not only for the Palestinians, but for us as Israelis.
Anthony, if I could...
Additionally, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
if I can just add an additional point. Over the past year, there was a bill that was launched by some of the more extreme parties in the Knesset that tried to legalize many of the illegal settlements in the West Bank. And OneVoice, along with our partners, worked tirelessly to stop this bill. And we were able to add enough pressure onto the political level that they ended up vetoing it, which worked out, amazing, and I think proves to the people who oftentimes lose hope in the political leaders that yes, if you rise up, if you express your voice, that yes, change is possible.
Anthony, if I could turn to you, a lot of people will be very happy to see articulate, eloquent and active individuals like Gabi and Ahmad very much working towards a peace solution. But in your experience working over there, are these two individuals in a minority?
No, I'm pleased to say that's not my experience. I mean, as I've said, the polling that we've done shows that Ahmed and Gabi have the support of their people behind them. And we have had amazing success. I mean, in Palestine, for example, the OneVoice movement is the second biggest youth movement in the whole of Palestine. We have chapters, I think, in 18 towns across the West Bank, towns and cities, that is. So it's I think that's an example of how widespread the feeling is that something needs to change, and the change needs to be positive rather than regressive. So no, I mean, we're expanding our programs all the time. I mean, recently, for example, in OneVoice Palestine, I realised today we're all males in the studio, but we've actually just launched the first ever women's project in Palestine. It's called Women of Influence.
Fantastic.
This project is going to be empowering women from communities across the West Bank to play their role in the negotiations and play their role in promoting the peace process. And I'm really, really proud we're doing that.
Ahmad, I know this is the first time that yourself and Gabi have met, and I know you've had a decent amount of time to sit down, to engage in dialogue, to learn more about each other's lives. Have you learnt a lot? Have you been quite surprised by what you've learnt about Gabi's life and Gabi's views perhaps on the current situation in Israel/Palestine?
I think it's a very important chance to meet with the Israeli partner who is working on the same goal and to achieve the same idea for the OneVoice, and really appreciate this time with Gabi and with OneVoice Europe to share and to engage and to exchange our ideas and to make sure that we are working in the same direction to achieve the main goal for the OneVoice, which is two-state solution. And really I was surprised from the style of thinking in Israel side, and it's a good opportunity for me to know about the mentality and the way of thinking in the Israeli society, and if they are willing to end the conflict or not. It's important for us, for Palestinians, to be aware about the seriousness of the Israeli side to end this conflict, and it's very important also for the Gabi to know and to be aware about the Palestinian society and their also seriousness to end this conflict and to have the two independent states.
Gabi, when you look at your average Israeli or your average Palestinian, maybe a youngster like yourself, there is a danger, perhaps some may suggest, that when you live in a country where political views are rather high, where tensions are quite high at the best of times between yourself and your neighbours, you may be fed or may be given one perspective of what's going on by your media and by whatever people in the community say around you. Do you think that, obviously you've been quite fortunate that you've been able to speak to people like Ahmad, but do you think that generally speaking your peers out there in Israel actually appreciate or understand the crisis from the point of view of the Palestinians, from people like Ahmad?
I believe that it's a complicated issue again, and as I've said many times, the whole situation there is complicated.
Absolutely.
I believe that only a small portion of Israeli society actually has any contact with Palestinians. Most of us, in my first time having contact with Palestinians, was actually in the army. But I believe, more importantly, because of the feelings of victimization on both sides, where we both see ourselves as victims and as current participants in the conflict, it's oftentimes hard at times for individuals to view the other as suffering as well. However, I do believe that people realize that the situation is untenable, that you have people like Ahmed and his partners in OneVoice Palestine who are attempting to create something better for themselves. We're trying to create a more stable society, which at the end of the day is better for Israel. I believe that the best thing that can happen for Israel is to have a strong and stable Palestine. And I think that many Israelis understand that is part of their interest.
What I'd like to add to that myself is that I think while it is a big challenge to make when you're in the midst of a conflict, not in a post-conflict zone, but when you're right in the heart of a conflict, to expect one side to fully empathise with the other is a very difficult challenge.
Sure.
So what we're doing in OneVoice is actually bypassing that. We work in each side's national interest. The reason that Ahmed and so many other thousands of Palestinians are engaged in OneVoice Palestine is they're not doing out of kindness for Israelis. Certainly that's not their prime reason. The reason is because they want to end the occupation, have a better life, have a better future for themselves. The reason that Israelis such as Gabi are and thousands more are engaged in OneVoice Israel, again, it's not primarily because they want a better future for Palestinians. It's because they want a better future for Israel, and they recognise, and as so many, even so many politicians and academics and members of the public are saying, the best way to guarantee Israel's future security and prosperity is through a two-state solution and ending the occupation. So it's self-interest which does not impact on the other side.
Now, we are unfortunately running out of time, as is always the case in wonderful and exciting discussions like this. And let me just say how delighted we are to hear about the OneVoice movement and the fantastic dialogue, not just dialogue, but pressure that you are exerting on leaders on both sides to say, look, peace is what we want, violence is what we want to end. But before we seal up our session today, if I could have concluding comments from each of you, that would be fantastic. If I start off with yourself, Ahmad. Ahmad, what are your plans for the future?
For me, I'm working for the Monetary Authority, which is like the emerging central bank of Palestine. I'm looking forward to have our national central bank in Palestine and to have our national security through achieving the dream of the two-state solution. I think the two-state solution will achieve all of the Palestinian dreams.
Anthony, what's next for the OneVoice movement? Where do you, as a movement, hope to go from here?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of, as well as pessimism, there's a lot of optimism on the horizon. I think we've just seen elections in Israel, which produced a far more favourable result in terms of those of us who are seeking out a two-state solution could have hoped for. We're also seeing in Palestine the signs that that Hamas wants to join the PLO, which I think is a very significant move, again, in favour of a two-state solution and away from violent extremism. So with this. Where there's an opportunity, OneVoice needs to step up. When we see optimism, it's not the time to sit back and hope it's going to get better. It's the time for us, or rather it's the time for Ahmed and Gabi and thousands of activists on the ground to stand up and make sure that change happens. So we're stepping up with a number of new programs. As I said, I can't go through them all now, but we're just launching a new women's program in Palestine, which is very exciting. In Israel, we're going to continue the campaigns, letting the Israeli public know and informing people that the two-state solution is the best way to secure Israel's future alongside the state of Palestine. And I hope that these activists go from strength to strength.
Yeah, and we wish them the very best of luck. Gabi, yourself, you're obviously quite a talented young individual. You're somebody who is just as keen as Ahmed to get a peace solution so that you can go on to achieve your full potential as an individual, but also to give your communities around you, your family, your friends, the ability and the comfort to know that they can live in peace. Well, what are your future plans? What do you hope to do from here?
I hope to become, I hope to continue to become active in working towards two-state solution. I hope to help build a life for myself. Get married, have kids, find a job that help support myself, and kind of see how things go. I'm personally inspired by people like Ahmad, people who are looking to build his state, build his institutions, create a strong state that I hope to one day live alongside. And I'm a pragmatic optimist. I understand the difficulties and the challenges that we face, but as a person who hopes for a better future, I see good things down the road.
Absolutely. Inshallah, God willing, we wish you all the very best of luck. It is a fact that you can't expect, as Gabby, I think, pointed out earlier, for two sides who have had so much history, so much tension with one another, to be able to become good friends. But at least we've got two good friends here that have been made, Gabby and Ahmad. And I would also like to thank Anthony as well for popping down to the studio. We wish, on behalf of the Friday Night Fusion team, the very best of luck to OneVoice, and we certainly hope to be interviewing some more of your activists very soon to talk about this very important issue. Thank you all for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.